Yes, the question about liberty and security and their relationship between them. I mean, the communist way of framing that, of course, is this very seductive metaphor of the balance between liberty and security, the need to rebalance between liberty and security. It appeals at the level of common sense, and it's an appeal that seems to be both obvious and fair. It's a simple trade-off between two values, it seems. But this is why we need to be very careful, because indeed they are not two values that can be traded off one against another. They're not two different commodities you can swap as if on a supermarket shelf. They are competing values, and they have been in competition for a long time, and they've been in competition especially in relation to the long history of what we could now call the state or the democratic state and democracy in general. And as you know, it's the easiest thing in the world for any politician to declare some kind of emergency or security systems, security operation, in order to put kinds of limits, boundaries, borders on the sphere of freedoms and liberties. So that in effect what you've got is an opposition between one value which is assumed to be normal, i.e. freedom, liberty, and one value which is assumed to be working at the edge or limits or boundaries of what we take to be normal, i.e. security. And rather than two similar sorts of values, you've got the classic opposition between the norm and the exceptional condition, or the normal and the limit condition, or what goes on in the middle of something and what goes on at the edge of something. Our conventional way of thinking about the exception is to talk about the exception. We have peace, except when we make an exception to declare war. It is the grand exception that defines the normal conditions in which we are supposed to be living a normal life within a normalized state. But if you move to a world in which boundaries are not disappearing or staying where they are, but being disaggregated and rearticulated, what you have is potentially a differentiation of practices of exception. Not the great exception, but many small exceptions. And many small exceptions, of course, may be less threatening than one big exception. They may be less dramatic, but they are nevertheless still crucial to the way in which we organize relations between the internal and the external, between the included and the excluded, between the legal and the illegal. And so rather than the rather simple story which is beloved of the realists of international relations and the foreign policy types and the defense analysts and so on, I think we need to think much more seriously about the details, the complexities of a multiplicity of differentiating, dividing practices, many of which do work not as simple distinctions, but precisely as attempts to define exceptions to what counts as normal. So one of the peculiar versions of exceptionalism that occurs in the modern world is precisely not to speak about the enemy, but to speak about the human. And of course, all kinds of damage has been done, and not only recently, to many human beings by invoking the claim to humanity. It seems that some humans are really human and some humans are not. And that kind of mode of operating is a version of an exceptionalist practice, which is often articulated as if it is somehow ethical and beneficial to everybody, but in fact is likely to do a lot of damage to a lot of people who are merely human, rather than human in the way understood to be legitimate by the prevailing authorities.